Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's webinar. My name is Anastatia Sideri, and I'm the coordinator of the Master Program in Drug Regulatory Affairs, which is a distance learning master offered by the Pharmacy Program at the University of Nicosia. As part of our effort to provide specialized and up-to-date information to our students, graduates, but also to the general public, we have scheduled tonight's seminar covering a contemporary topic. The title of the seminar is Regulatory Mechanisms for the Development and Approval of Drugs and Vaccines for SARS-CoV-2. Everyone these days would like to know how drugs and vaccines are approved for COVID-19, especially under the emergency use authorization. It is therefore a great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Anastatia Sideri, Senior Medical Advisor, Medical Affairs, Excelya Greece, and Adjunct Lecturer in Drug Regulatory Affairs Master Program, who will give us the highlights of the regulatory approval process of COVID-19 drugs and vaccines. With that said, I will now turn to Anastasia to continue with the presentation. Anastasia?
Thank you, Lefteris, and allow me to thank the faculty of the university overall for this for tonight's presentation. So the topic is an overview of the regulatory mechanisms that have been put in motion since the beginning of this epidemic for the development and approval of drugs and vaccines for COVID-19. And starting off, European Medicines Agency is responsible for coordinating scientific resources for the evaluation, supervision, and pharmacovigilance of medicinal products that are authorized in EU, both under normal circumstances and during emergency conditions. And before we continue, please allow me to give a definition of what the emerging health threat is according to the European Medicines Agency. So an emerging health threat or a serious cross-border health threat can be defined as a hazard of biological, chemical, environmental, or unknown origin, which is likely to spread across national borders of member states, and which may cause a potential severe risk to public health, necessitating a coordinated action at the union level in order to ensure high-level human health protection. Therefore, EMA has the ability to mobilize a number of tools to speed up the development of medicines and vaccines during emerging health threats or outbreaks, to allow responses that are proportional to the size of the challenge. So during a pandemic, in addition to setting these wheels in motion, the EMA cooperates with MS experts, assesses potential treatments and vaccines in a fast-track manner, based, of course, on temporary and exceptional measures. All these are outlined in the EMA's health threat plan, which is based on the EMA's pandemic plan. This document sets out the roles and responsibilities of EMA scientific committees and staff during public health threats and their interactions with other stakeholders, not only at EU level, for example, among member states, but also with international partners. The EMA's health threat plan is not a static plan. It has been refined with knowledge that has been gained from health emergencies in the past, such as the H1N1 pandemic of 2009, and health emergencies worldwide, such as the Ebola outbreak in Western Africa. The overall aim of the health threat plan is to manage and coordinate the discussions on development, authorization, and surveillance of relevant medicinal products, as well as their post-authorization follow-up that are used to address the emerging health threat. And of course, the proposed actions are analogous to the crisis level. On the level score from 1 to 4, the most serious one is level 4.
Anastasia?
Not only during emergency conditions, but EMA routinely, proactively undertakes routine preparedness activities in relation to products in development and regular interactions with stakeholders to ensure that it will be in a state of readiness when a health threat comes up. And by regular interactions, I mean interactions with its working parties, as well as other stakeholders. For example, the European Commission, the Health Security Committee, the European Centre for Disease Control and Prevention, member states, as well as international partners and the industry.
Anastasia?
The EMA, one of the first actions that were implemented during this pandemic was convening the COVID-19 EMA Pandemic Task Force. This task force will remain convened until the pandemic is over. Its members are experts from various working parties and committees of the EMA, namely the Pediatric Committee, the Committee for Human Medicinal Products, and the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee, as well as other member state experts and members of other working parties. This task force, ETF for short, is accountable to the EMA's Human Medicinal Products Committee, the CHMP. The responsibilities of the committee of the EMA's task force include review of the available scientific data on COVID-19 medicines and identification of promising candidates to move further on development, requesting data from developers and engaging with them in preliminary discussions, offer scientific support in collaboration with other groups for clinical trials conducted in the EU for the most promising candidates, provide feedback on development plans, act as advisor to safety working parties or CHMP on request of formal scientific advice and product-related assessments, as well as contributing to the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessments Committee's activities, and ensure overall close cooperation with stakeholders as well as European and international organizations. Before we proceed to outlining the regulatory schemes that have been that are in place for the fast-track development and approval of medicines and vaccines, in terms of the principles that are applied for the approval of drugs and medicines during this pandemic. We said that EMA, one of the first actions was convening the ETF, the EMA's task force, and mobilizing human resources, funding, regulatory support to the most suitable directions to support its actions. It has also implemented fast-track procedures that can accelerate every step of the regulatory pathway, while ensuring at the same time that robust evidence on efficacy, safety, and quality is generated to support scientific and regulatory decisions. And in the subsequent slides, we shall go through every one of these points that are mentioned here. Bear in mind that all those schemes that are outlined here are, some of them are available under normal, non-emergency circumstances as well. They have been accelerated where time periods are involved. These time periods have been reduced to minimum to allow the fast-track development and approval of medicines and vaccines for COVID-19. And also bear in mind that these schemes are not mutually exclusive. Starting off with early support, regardless of the provision of scientific advice, EMA encourages developers of potential vaccines or medicines for COVID-19 to contact the agency as soon as possible to discuss their strategy for evidence generation. There are also guidance documents in place that outline how this clinical evidence must be generated for the demonstration of clinical efficacy and safety. This, however, has a necessary prerequisite that developers must submit well-prepared applications to make the best use of EMA's fast-track procedures for COVID-19 treatments and vaccines. And EMA, in turn, prioritizes the most relevant proposals for fast-track development and approval. Scientific advice, the provision of scientific advice, is a scheme that is available for EMA to potential applicants under certain conditions. However, to respond to the pandemic, EMA can now provide rapid scientific advice. And these two tables outline the differences between scientific advice that is applicable in non-emergency conditions and rapid scientific advice that is applicable during this pandemic. Starting off, the rapid scientific advice provision is free of charge, whereas scientific advice under normal circumstances comes with a charge, although exemptions apply. The review of the documentation that is provided by the applicant is reduced to a maximum of 20 days, as opposed to 40 or 70 days under normal circumstances. And the applicant does not need to adhere to strict submission deadlines and format of the briefing dossier that is going to be discussed. Therefore, under the rapid scientific advice scheme, there is flexibility on the type and extent of briefing dossier, no pre-specified submission deadlines, and the EMA task force can provide early scientific advice even for developers whose development plan is still not suitable for formal rapid scientific advice. Moving on to pediatric investigational plans, as of July 2008, all marketing authorization applications in EU must contain the results of studies on pediatric population according to agreed pediatric investigation plans with the Pediatric Committee and the EMA, or potential deferrals or waivers depending on the indications of the concerned medicinal product. Under the conditions of the epidemic, the certain provisions regarding regarding agreement of pediatric investigation plans and compliance have been stepped up to be rapid. Therefore, the review is reduced to within 20 days as opposed to 120 days for the proposed pediatric investigation plan. And these 20 days are minimum depending on the complexity of the plan and the preparedness of the applicant to respond to questions raised by the Pediatric Committee and the EMA's task force. The decision of the EMA on the pediatric plan is reduced to 2 days as opposed to 10 days, and applicants are allowed to provide scientific documentation that is focused depending on the circumstances and the medicine under development. And also, when the marketing authorization application is submitted, EMA undergoes compliance checks to make sure that the proposed pediatric investigation plans adhere to the conditions that were discussed. These compliance checks are reduced to 4 days as opposed to 60 days under normal circumstances. Furthermore, to enable acceleration regarding pediatric investigation plan assessment, pre-submission meetings are encouraged between the applicants and the Pediatric Committee and the EMA's task force. And applicants are also encouraged to submit a letter of intent well ahead in advance of the pediatric investigation plan application, providing EMA with information about the product under development, its intended use in preventing or treating COVID-19, as well as timelines. Another important advantage under the rapid pediatric investigation plan scheme is the offer of joint procedural information from both EMA and FDA to medicine developers. Other provisions include the adoption of a regulation in last summer, in July 2020, regarding the conduct of clinical trials with treatments and vaccines against COVID-19 that contain genetically modified organisms. So, under normal circumstances, developers of treatments and vaccines that contain GMOs had to submit environmental risk assessment along with the clinical trials across Europe, and bearing in mind that there are other medicine developers whose clinical trials or products have been postponed or are halted to give prioritization to COVID-19 medicines and vaccines, or to address the disruption on ongoing clinical trials of non-COVID medicines, EMA has issued good clinical practice guidance with information to developers on how to monitor their subjects during the pandemic, how to address informed consent issues, and other aspects that pertain to clinical trials. Moving on now to the schemes that are in place for the accelerated approval of medicines and vaccines. These include rolling review of data, accelerated assessment of centralized marketing authorization, conditional marketing authorization, compassionate use, and extension of indications for existing authorized drugs. So, starting first with the rolling review, this is an ad hoc procedure used in an emergency context. It is therefore not available under normal circumstances, and allows EMA to continually assess in real time the data that are generated for highly promising medicines as they become available. That means preceding the formal submission of a complete application for a marketing authorization, while clinical trials with the promising medicines are still ongoing, whereas under normal circumstances, all data that support a marketing authorization application have to be submitted at the start of the evaluation procedure. This enables the review of a marketing authorization application dossier earlier, while ensuring that robust scientific opinions are generated. There can be several rolling review cycles for each product. Each cycle lasts for approximately 2 weeks, and responses to questions from previous rolling cycles can be carried over into subsequent rolling review cycle submissions. The rolling review procedure continues until enough evidence is generated to support a formal marketing authorization application. And because schemes, images are sometimes louder than words, this figure from the EMA website explains how the rolling review procedure goes. So, as opposed to normal standard circumstances where a developer would apply for a marketing authorization application and the EMA would have to evaluate the data that have been generated, simply because during rolling review the data are scrutinized in advance, the decision between applying for a marketing authorization application and granting marketing authorization application are very shortened. The medicines and drugs the medicines and vaccines that have been approved for COVID-19 all fall under centralized marketing authorization. I will not go through the process of centralized marketing authorization application, but the important point that I would like to raise is that all the assessment of medicine, of the new medicine for centralized marketing authorization under normal circumstances usually lasts around a year, approximately 277 days, without counting stop logs for responses between the applicant, for responses to questions raised by the EMA. The accelerated assessment allows EMA to issue centralized marketing authorizations, allows EMA have been approved by a conditional marketing authorization. So this means that the marketing authorization has been granted based on less comprehensive data than would be expected. However, comprehensive data are expected to be provided post-approval and will be provided within defined timeframes. Conditional marketing authorization has 1 year validity and is subject to annual reviews, and post-approval commitments are imposed to marketing authorization holders of medicines and vaccines who are granted conditional marketing authorization. However, once comprehensive clinical data are provided and evaluated, the conditional marketing authorization is converted to bear in mind that conditional marketing authorization is a scheme that is available under normal circumstances as well, as long as the benefit-risk balance of the concerned product is positive, the applicant is likely to provide comprehensive data, unmet medical needs will be fulfilled, and the benefit to the public following the immediate availability of the concerned product on the market outweighs potential risks. All these four criteria apply during a pandemic. This is why COVID-19 vaccines have been approved by conditional marketing authorization. Additional schemes include the compassionate use scheme, which is a treatment option that allows the use of unauthorized medicines under strict conditions to patients who have a disease with no satisfactory authorized therapies, and these subjects cannot enter clinical trials. The compassionate use scheme is regulated by individual member states, and EMA can only provide recommendation. However, developers of products for the treatment or prevention of COVID-19 are encouraged to contact EMA in dedicated email and provide information on compassionate use applications that are underway at national level to speed up potential consultation required by the concerned member states. However, under normal circumstances, compassionate use scheme is for already authorized medicines that can work against COVID-19. EMA is flexible in shortening review times for marketing authorization applications to extend their indications, precisely for the reason of repurposing these drugs for the treatment or prevention of COVID-19. So, overall, we can say that four main schemes have been put in motion and have allowed the rapid development and approval of COVID-19 medicines and vaccines. These include resource mobilization, continuous dialogue with experts, accelerated support and approval, as well as speed up in manufacturing process. And this is exemplified by this figure that I have copied from the EMA's website, which details the process of developing a vaccine under normal circumstances and during this pandemic. As you can see here, each step in the development and approval of a vaccine under normal circumstances begins once the previous step is over. However, during the pandemic, you can see that there is overlap in many of the concerned steps, and large-scale production commences while scientific evaluation and authorization is still underway, and not after marketing authorization is granted. There are also post-approval commitments that marketing authorization holders for treatments and vaccines for COVID-19 have, as outlined in the conditional marketing authorization scheme, and furthermore. So the post-approval commitments in terms of their core safety requirements are the same as those for any other vaccine in the EU. However, due to the large number of vaccinated people, additional resources have been mobilized to closely monitor safety and to assess any new information that comes. As we all know, during medicines development, we only see, regardless of this pandemic, we only see the tip of the iceberg. And only once a vaccine or a treatment is available to the public, more information is gained. This is why all COVID-19 vaccines are subject to additional monitoring, which is exemplified by the inverse black triangle. So Approved COVID-19 vaccines are monitored more intensively than other medicines, and their marketing authorization holders have additional post-authorization obligations compared to other holders. There are also challenges that come with this pandemic. And the most obvious one is that data from future clinical trials with treatments and vaccines that have been approved for COVID-19 might challenge previous assessments. This is something that cannot be avoided, and having a vaccine or a medicine available at this period might save thousands or millions of lives. However, more research is needed, especially in some groups of patients, and to generate more information regarding already authorized treatments and vaccines. There are also lessons that have been learned, and there is always space for improvement. The European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control continuously provides risk assessment and scientific guidance based on the epidemiological spread of the COVID-19 virus, and EMA has streamlined its assessment procedures to allow for more efficient assessments of promising candidates, vaccines, or treatments. However, strengthening existing structures and mechanisms and further improvement in response and preparedness are always welcome and required. The COVID-19 crisis has radically changed medicine and vaccine development for the better, and the European Commission has adopted a reinforced mandate to provide EMA with new powers, in addition to the existing one, to lead a more effective EU-wide response to health crisis. So the EMA will have additional responsibilities and will overview drug production as well, according to this mandate in terms of manufacturing. As always, we must bear in mind that there is the possibility that if post-approval evidence suggests that the risks outweigh the benefits, the marketing authorization of treatments and vaccines that have been approved for COVID-19 may be suspended. As always, regardless of this pandemic, the evaluation of the benefit risk for existing authorized medicines is always continually updated with data from post-marketing surveillance. Therefore, this is something that does not affect only COVID-19 treatments and vaccines, but this is something that affects all vaccine developers regardless of this pandemic. And to wrap up, the take-home message that I would like you to get is that COVID-19 treatments and vaccines are developed via mechanisms that allow their fast-track development and approval, but that does not mean that their safety, efficacy, and quality are compromised. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Anastasia, for the interesting information you provided. I would just like to continue from your summary about the accelerated approval process that does not compromise the safety and efficacy of the vaccines or the drugs, by also adding and summarizing the previous information you provided, that the European Medicines Agency helps in speeding up the whole process by the continual dialogue with the applicants, the pharma industry, but also the rapid scientific advice, which is something really interesting. And of course, the rolling review process that these drugs and vaccines are going through. In the end, as you mentioned, and as you have shown, it's all about risk benefit, and every drug is still evaluated post-approval, which is very, very important. And of course, if at any point the risks are found to outnumber the benefits, then the authorization will be suspended. And with this, I would like to ask you a couple of questions on this last comment. What is the signal for suspending an authorization of a drug or a vaccine under this accelerated review? Is there a specific signal that will trigger the European Medicines to suspend the authorization?
I think there is no such thing as a single signal. The data from the safety data and the data on adverse drug reactions from treatments and vaccines for COVID-19 are scrutinized on are scrutinized continually. So there is no such thing as a single signal. It's evaluation of the overall data.
Okay.
And these are evaluated more regularly than under normal circumstances. And the information that is provided is more thorough and more complete in order to be able to reach a decision.
I see. And another question I have is, how important is the scientific advice in the whole process, given that it's a pandemic, everyone is rushing to approve the drug or the vaccine, and how is the scientific advice helping the applicants to achieve their target? Is it going like, is the scientific advice given during the whole R&D process, during the production of a vaccine or a drug, or is it continual?
It's continual, because scientific advice is a scheme that is available under normal circumstances as well. It can concern both the pre-authorization, and post-authorization actions, and involves manufacturing, quality, non-clinical, preclinical trials, as well as clinical trials. So scientific advice might be provided at any point, rapid scientific advice as well, at any point during a medicine's development, even after it is approved. Bear in mind that with COVID-19 vaccines, there are ongoing trials in pediatric population or in special population. So these are subject to scientific advice as well on how to conduct the clinical study in terms of protocol and the assessments that would have to be carried.
And given what you said about the pediatric investigation plan, basically, how does that differ from the clinical trials in adults? Is it mandatory that a pediatric investigation plan is done after a drug or a vaccine is tested in the adult population, or can it be done at the same time?
Well, during this fast track procedure scheme, pediatric investigation plans, the applicants and the EMA discuss on potential deferrals until the vaccine or treatment is tested on enough adults to gain enough experience with what we should expect from adults. Children are different from adults, and they also they're a vulnerable population, so they should be protected further. So the EMA and the developers discuss on gain scientific advice and discuss on the studies that they are planning to conduct to generate enough information on pediatric population. But these are usually at a later time point after the vaccine has been tested or the treatment on enough adults to gain enough knowledge of the way it works, potential adverse events. I think that Moderna has now filed for initiating studies on pediatric population, and the Moderna vaccine for adults has been approved almost 2 or 3 months, I think, the beginning of this year. So there is this time lag before initiating trials on pediatric patients, pediatric subjects for this matter, because they are not necessarily sick with COVID-19.
Good. I don't have any other questions. I think we got the general idea, and we have seen that everything is just accelerated, and there are the EMA doesn't cut any corners in the safety and in the efficacy. It's just an accelerated process, and also they give a lot of help to the applicants so that the drug and the vaccine gets approval if, of course, it meets the minimum requirements of safety and efficacy.
Exactly, yes.
Anything else you want to add to this whole process of approval? Do you see any room based on this approval process? Do you think that EMA will also will be able to accelerate regular marketing authorization for drugs that are not for pandemics? Because I think all this process has given them enough experience on how to communicate more effectively also with the pharma industry and help them to achieve their target. Based on what you have said.
It has certainly made clear that we stand divided we fall. There is close interaction between regulatory authorities worldwide and international stakeholders such as the WHO. And I don't foresee that this rapid scheme, I think it's not very, for the people that are involved, probably they are worn out by the process. But during this pandemic, there are still evaluations ongoing for other drugs under development, non-COVID drugs, even though there has been such a huge mobilization of resources towards COVID-19 treatments and vaccines. So under normal circumstances, the workload that EMA faces is such that I don't think that the fast track approval will carry on beyond this pandemic for other under normal circumstances. But it is certainly very thrilling to see how resources, people, and organizations at the worldwide level can all join forces against this pandemic. It is absolutely amazing.
Excellent. I don't have any other questions. I don't know if we have any questions from the audience. I don't see any question here. We will make, of course, the video available in our website, in the master's website, and also we will make available the presentation, because due to some internet issues, some of the slides have not been seen, so that anyone can actually go and look at and study the slides and see exactly what is the approval process, but also what is the difference between the regular marketing authorization versus the accelerated marketing authorization procedure. So you can search in the website of the University of Nicosia for the Master in Drug Regulatory Affairs in the next few days, and you will find the slides so that you can review them at your own pace. Anything else, Anastasia, as a final word? If you can hear us. I think I don't think Anastasia can hear us.
Yes, I can.
You can. Okay. Do you want to say a final word before we conclude this webinar?
Thank you for the opportunity, and it is for all. I am biologist in background. It is nice to see that there is always that there are ways that one can help in the medicine development and approval in by other means, not only in the laboratory, but also by gaining knowledge in regulatory affairs and being absorbed in organizations, in drug regulatory agencies. So it is always it is amazing to see how far the marketing, the development of drugs and vaccines has progressed during this time.
Thank you, Anastasia, for the presentation. And thank you, everybody, for attending this webinar. We can conclude now and have a nice evening.
You too. Thank you.